For 4 years, Corbin Hayes accepted the official story. His father, a renowned wildlife photographer, was simply another soul claimed by the unforgiving Louisiana Bayou, likely dragged under by an alligator. The case went cold, leaving Corbin with nothing but a legacy of stunning photographs and gnawing uncertainty. But that fragile peace shatters when a kayaker finds a waterproof bag floating in a stagnant channel containing a pristine vinyl record of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, the exact album Corbin gave his father for his last birthday. Suddenly, the narrative of a tragic accident feels hollow. This wasn't random debris. It was a message. What do you think this strange clue means? Stick around as we unravel this bizarre mystery, and let us know your initial theories down in the comments. Corbin stared at the photograph on his phone, his thumb hovering over the image as if he could somehow feel the object through the glass screen. It was a large, clear Ziploc bag, clouded with a bit of condensation on the inside. But through the plastic, the album cover was unmistakable. The grand orchestra, the bold, familiar text. Beethoven, Symphony No. 5. He didn't need the sheriff on the other end of the line to tell him what it was. He knew every crease and corner of that album cover. He'd spent a month's savings on it when he was 19, a rare German pressing he'd found online. His father, Adrian, had been thrilled, his eyes lighting up in a way they usually only did when he captured the perfect shot of a nesting heron. "Mr. Hayes, are you still there?" The voice of Deputy Boudreau crackled through the phone, pulling Corbin from his thoughts. "Yeah, I'm here," Corbin managed, his voice tight. "I'm looking at it. It's his." Corbin was an architect in Austin, a world of steel, glass, and concrete, a world he had deliberately built for himself as far away from the oppressive humidity and murky waters of his childhood home in Louisiana as he could get. For 4 years, he'd managed to compartmentalize his grief. Adrian Hayes was gone. The Bayou had taken him. It was a dangerous place, and his father knew the risks better than anyone. That was the story, neat and tragic, and it allowed Corbin to function. But this was not neat. A record in a bag, floating as if placed there by hand, defied all logic. He ended the call after promising to drive down the next morning. The 8-hour drive from Austin to the small town of Lacombe, Louisiana, was a blur of highways and silent reflection. With every mile, the carefully constructed walls around his father's memory began to crumble. An alligator attack was random. A sinkhole was random. A pristine, waterproofed record floating in a swamp channel was not. It felt intentional. It felt like a story was finally beginning, 4 years after it was supposed to have ended. The St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office was a small brick building that smelled of stale coffee and damp paper. Deputy Boudreau, a man whose tired eyes had seen too many strange things come out of the swamp, led Corbin into an evidence room. There it was on a metal table. The bag had been opened, but the record was inside, looking almost new. "A couple on a kayak tour found it tangled in some cypress roots about 5 miles upriver from where your father's boat was recovered," Boudreau explained, his voice a low, gravelly drawl. "They thought it was trash. Then they saw what was inside. Figured it was strange enough to call in." Corbin reached out and touched the cardboard sleeve. "This was the last birthday present I ever gave him," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "He loved classical music, said it was the only thing that could silence the noise of the swamp in his head." Boudreau nodded slowly. "We thought it was unusual, but honestly, son, we don't know what to make of it. Could have been a prank. Could have been a tribute from a friend you don't know about. Without more to go on, it's just a curiosity." Corbin knew the deputy was just doing his job, closing the door on a dead-end clue. But for Corbin, this was the first door that had opened in years. He couldn't let it close. "I want to go to his studio," Corbin said, a sudden resolve in his voice. "I haven't touched it since it happened. Maybe there's something there." Adrian Hayes' studio was a detached garage he had converted into his personal sanctuary. It was just as Corbin had left it, thick with the smell of darkroom chemicals, old books, and dust. A layer of grime covered everything. For 4 years, he couldn't bring himself to clean it, to pack it up. It felt like erasing the last traces of his father, Now, he was grateful he hadn't. He spent the rest of the day carefully going through his father's things. He looked through boxes of negatives, flipping through thousands of images of egrets, gators, and sun-drenched cypress trees. It was in a large leather-bound logbook that he found his first real lead. His father was a meticulous record keeper. Every photograph was logged with the date, time, camera settings, and GPS coordinates. As Corbin flipped through the pages of the final year, he noticed a shift. The entries, once solely focused on wildlife, started to include notes about a new project, a project his father had never mentioned to him. It was a portrait series, something Adrian had always avoided, claiming he didn't have the patience for people. The subject was a man he referred to only as Silas. The notes were fascinating. Adrian described Silas as a modern-day hermit, a man who lived entirely off the grid deep within the Atchafalaya Basin, miles from any town. He wrote about the man's resilience, his deep knowledge of the swamp, and the quiet dignity with which he lived. But what struck Corbin most was the tone. It wasn't the detached, observational tone of a photographer studying a subject. It was warm, full of respect, and a growing sense of friendship. One entry read, "Silas doesn't talk much, but when he does, you listen. He sees his place not as something to be conquered or tamed, but as something to be a part of." We sat by his fire last night, and I played him the Beethoven record. He just closed his eyes and nodded along as if he'd known the music his whole life. Corbin's heart hammered in his chest. The record. It wasn't a random tribute from some unknown friend. It was tied to this man, Silas. He found the last entry in the journal, dated the day before his father disappeared. It contained a set of GPS coordinates deeper in the swamp than any of the others. The note beside it was simple: heading out to Silas's camp. He says he has something to show me, a place the water spirits protect. Corbin knew what he had to do. The official search had been extensive, but it had focused on the area where the boat was found. These coordinates were miles away, in a labyrinth of waterways that even experienced guides avoided. He spent the next day gathering supplies and renting a small, sturdy, flat-bottomed boat with a shallow motor. Deputy Boudreau tried to talk him out of it, warning him about the dangers, but Corbin's mind was made up. His father had gone into that swamp to meet a friend. Corbin was going to retrace his steps. The journey into the bayou was like entering another world. The air grew thick and heavy, filled with the drone of insects and the calls of unseen birds. Cypress trees draped in Spanish moss rose from the black water like ancient skeletons. Following the GPS on his phone, Corbin navigated the maze of narrow channels, the water growing shallower and the vegetation denser with each mile. Several times he had to cut the motor and pull his way through thick patches of water hyacinth. It was clear why the official search party had never made it this far. After nearly 5 hours, the GPS indicated he was close. He finally saw it, a small spit of land, barely an island, that was higher than the surrounding swamp. Tucked beneath a canopy of ancient live oaks was a small, crudely built shack, smoke curling lazily from a makeshift chimney. It was exactly as his father's journal had described. He cut the engine, the sudden silence deafening. He felt a knot of fear and anticipation tighten in his stomach. He was about to meet the last person to see his father alive. He tied the boat to a low-hanging branch and cautiously made his way onto the small island. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sounding small in the vast wilderness. "Is anyone here?" The door of the shack creaked open. The man who emerged was tall and gaunt, with a long graying beard and skin that was weathered like old leather. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, fixed on Corbin with an immediate and unnerving intensity. He held an old, worn hatchet in his hand, his knuckles white. "You're trespassing," the man said, his voice a low rasp, unused to conversation. "This is private land. Turn around and leave." "Are you Silas?" Corbin asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man's eyes narrowed. "Who's asking?" "My name is Corbin Hayes. My father was Adrian Hayes, the photographer. I think he knew you." The name Adrian hung in the thick air between them. For a moment, the man's hostile expression faltered, replaced by something Corbin couldn't quite read. Pain, maybe? Or fear. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Never heard of him, Silas said flatly. You've got the wrong place. Now get off my land before I make you. He took a step forward, raising the hatchet slightly. Corbin's survival instinct screamed at him to retreat, to get back in his boat and go straight to the police. This man was dangerous. He could be the one. He could be a killer, and Corbin was alone with him, miles from civilization. But then he remembered the record. He had to know. Someone found a record, Corbin said, his words coming out in a rush. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. It was floating in the water, sealed in a bag. It was my father's. He watched Silas's face. The reaction was undeniable. The man's entire body went rigid. The color drained from his weathered cheeks, and the hatchet in his hand lowered until it was limp by his side. A look of profound, heart-wrenching anguish washed over his features. The tough, threatening exterior dissolved in an instant, revealing a man consumed by sorrow so deep it was terrifying to witness. In that moment, Corbin's fear vanished, replaced by a shocking new certainty. This man wasn't a murderer. He was a mourner, and he had been mourning Adrian Hayes for 4 long, silent years. The mystery of his father's death wasn't a case of foul play. It was something far more complicated and far more tragic. Silas stood frozen for a long moment, his gaze fixed on some distant point in the swamp, as if reliving a memory. The hard lines of his face softened with grief, and his shoulders slumped. He finally looked at Corbin, his eyes filled with a weary sadness. "You better come inside," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. He turned and walked back into the shack, leaving the door open behind him. Corbin hesitated for only a second before following him into the dim interior. The inside of the shack was simple and surprisingly neat. A small cot was in one corner, a handmade table and chair in the center. Shelves lined one wall, holding jars of preserved food, tools, and a small collection of weathered books. A small, wood-burning stove provided the only source of heat. Silas gestured for Corbin to sit in the single chair, while he himself sat on the edge of the cot, his hands clasped between his knees. "Your father," Adrian, Silas began, his voice low and halting. "He was a good man. The only person who ever came out here and didn't look at me like I was some kind of animal. He just wanted to understand." He explained how Adrian had found him by chance while tracking a rare, ivory-billed woodpecker. At first, Silas had been hostile, wanting only to be left alone. But Adrian was persistent, not with pressure, but with quiet respect. He would leave supplies, coffee, batteries, books, on the edge of the island and retreat. Slowly, over weeks, a trust was built. An unlikely friendship blossomed in the heart of the swamp. "He told me about you," Silas said, looking at Corbin. "Said you were smart, making a life for yourself away from all this. He was proud of you. He brought that record player out here. Said the music helped quiet the world down. We'd listen to that Beethoven, sitting right where you are now, watching the sun go down through the trees." Corbin listened, mesmerized. This was a side of his father he had never known. He had always seen Adrian as a solitary figure, more comfortable with wildlife than with people. To hear that he had found this deep connection with another person in his final months was both a comfort and a sharp ping of sorrow for the time lost. "What happened to him, Silas?" Corbin asked gently. "The day he disappeared." Silas's gaze dropped to the floorboards. He took a deep, shuddering breath before he could speak. "He was excited that morning," he recalled. "I had promised to show him a special place, an old cypress grove hidden deep in the basin. It's a place, the ground there is unstable. You have to know the paths. I've walked them my whole life." He described their journey that day, pushing through narrow, overgrown channels in a small pirogue. Adrian was taking photos, completely absorbed in the primeval beauty of the grove. "We were on foot, walking along a ridge of land between 2 channels," Silas continued, his voice cracking. "I was ahead. I told him to watch his step. The ground can look solid, but underneath, it's just muck, a sinkhole." Silas paused, swallowing hard. It happened so fast. One moment he was right behind me. The next he was gone. There was a sound, like a giant gasp, and the ground just gave way. He cried out once. I turned, and he was sinking. The mud, it's like quicksand. I tried to reach him. I grabbed a branch, tried to extend it to him, but he was too far. He was looking right at me, and then he just slipped under. Tears streamed down Silas's weathered face, silent and steady. I dug for hours. I dug with my bare hands until they were raw, but there was nothing. The swamp had taken him. He was gone. Corbin felt the air leave his lungs. The image Silas painted was horrifying, a brutal, random act of nature that was 1,000 times worse than the clean, simple story of an alligator attack. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Corbin asked, his voice thick. "Why let everyone think it was an animal?" "I panicked," Silas admitted, his voice full of shame. "Who would believe me? A hermit from the swamp? They'd say I killed him. For his cameras, for his boat. I had no proof. So I did nothing. I took his boat and set it adrift downriver, hoping they'd find it and assume the worst. I ran. I hid. And I've lived with the guilt every single day since." Now the record made a terrible kind of sense. "It was you," Corbin said softly. "You put the record in the water." Silas nodded, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I couldn't bear it anymore." 4 years of silence. I kept thinking about you, the son he was so proud of, thinking of you not knowing. I knew how much that record meant to him, to both of you. I figured if I put it out there, maybe it would find its way to you, that it would tell you something, that he wasn't just taken by some beast, that he had a friend with him at the end. It was all I could think to do. A memorial. An apology. The two men sat in silence, the weight of 4 years of grief and secrets filling the small shack. All the anger and suspicion Corbin had carried with him on his journey had dissolved, replaced by a wave of profound sadness for his father and for the lonely man in front of him who had carried this impossible burden alone. Corbin eventually left Silas's island, the full, tragic story finally settling in his mind. He went back to Deputy Boudreau and told him everything. There was no crime to investigate, no villain to punish. There was only the swamp and the terrible, impartial way it could claim a life. The case of Adrian Hayes was officially closed, the cause of death updated from unknown, presumed animal attack to accidental death by natural sinkhole. Before leaving Louisiana, Corbin went back to the Bayou one last time. He found Silas and gave him a small, solar-powered radio. "So you can have some music again," Corbin told him. It was a small gesture of forgiveness, of understanding. He knew his father would have wanted it that way. As he drove back to Austin, the world of steel and glass no longer felt like an escape, but simply a place to live. The hole his father's death had left in his life would never fully heal, but the gnawing uncertainty was gone. He had the truth. His father had died in a place he loved, in the company of a friend. And in the end, a strange message in a bag, a symphony of fate floating on dark water, had brought him a closure he never thought he would find. Silas's decision to send the record was a desperate act of remembrance, born from years of guilt. Do you think he did the right thing? Or should he have reported the accident to the authorities from the very beginning, regardless of the consequences? Share your thoughts on this difficult choice in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We appreciate every single one of you who tunes in and helps keep these stories alive.